if you think of joy, I think we think of joy, 2 Sundays of the year in the church's calendar, once during Lenten, once during Advent, it's Laetaria Gaudete Sundays. The emphasis is on joy, and I think we make the mistake of joy means somehow ruckus or loud celebration or giddiness or silliness, but in fact, joy is the happiness that comes from dispossession of self. That the moment we forget about ourselves, we're most free. Think of one of the deepest joys when we give a gift to someone we love, and it's the giving of that gift that in fact gives us a greater kind of satisfaction and joy. And we've forgotten entirely about ourselves at that moment. Sure. It's not as though we're sitting there like, oh, this is wonderful for me. No, it's totally other-centered. And I think the deepest joys in our life, as a married person, you must know this. Vocation of marriage is always that giving of self is the deepest kind of joy, and it's life-giving to your spouse and to you. And that's what's beautiful about it. So I think if we have to redefine success, redefine joy, not in terms of just what makes me happy, but a deeper kind of happiness that comes from the forgetting of oneself, putting one's own will aside, and serving others. But again, it's not something you can talk someone into. As you said, Paul, they've got to experience it. Once you experience it, young people at Notre Dame, Center for Social Concerns and other opportunities, these young people who come often from very nice backgrounds will spend their fall breaks working in very poor regions of the country, building houses, helping the poor. Those kids come back so often on fire. Mm-hmm. Because they are found that's such a life-giving experience. They got less sleep than they usually do. They slept on the gym floor. They traveled by a van. It was not, the lap of luxury by any means, but it's precisely in this experience of incredible service that they fall in love with the whole idea of giving their lives to others in service. But that doesn't happen unless they do it. I could give a talk about it. You could give a talk about it. Some student could give a talk about it. It's far less persuasive than the actual experience of giving one's life.
Also, that concept of joy can't be misinterpreted that when you're serving, it's all feel-good experience. And I think that's an interesting point, is agapic love or self-giving can be painful. It's uncomfortable sometimes. It can drain you. I know as a physician, you're giving yourself physically, mentally, psychologically, spiritually, patients. You can drain yourself in many capacities. You need to replenish that and find community to help you find that. But if you're willing to self-give, okay, that's when the sustainable joy, inner peace, and happiness settles in.
I think so much of what people hear today is the prosperity gospel, that if you love Jesus, you'll somehow be really successful and prosper, and you won't be tired, and you get lots of success. Any glance at a crucifix for 5 seconds tells you that's not the way it works. Exactly. That utterly pouring oneself out. But I think, again, in talking to parents, I've never had the vocation of parenthood, obviously, and of course today's Mother's Day, and we're thinking of all of our own mothers. The life that a mother gives to think of mothers that first couple of weeks after a child is born, all the sleep deprivation, all the exhaustion, and they're so happy. Mm-hmm. They're filled with joy because of that life that they've given life to and that they would give their life for in a heartbeat. And that's the kind of love and service that we're thinking. I mean, that's really what we're getting at.
That's a beautiful point.
I think the idea, too, of just the fact that as Christians, we're given a purpose. I mean, God has given us a purpose for being here. And when we have that purpose and that attitude, we don't get as tired when we're doing this kind of work, just like the mother. The love is so deep. And that makes all the difference. Well,
and I think thinking in terms of vocation, and I think the danger of this is when as soon as you hear priests say vocation, people think, oh, priests and nuns, and then maybe a throwaway line about married people. When I talk about vocation to the grade school children in my parish, for example, I talk about those like 4 or 5 different levels. First is just the vocation to existence. That the very fact that you or I exist is pure gift of God. And that itself is He calls us into being. The second level, the vocation to holiness that comes with baptism. There's obviously the vocation to state of life, married, single, religious, consecrated, ordained. But then there's, as you say, there's a particular vocation each day. That in fact God is calling us to something each day. We need to be attentive to how is it that I can live that vocation, given the circumstances of my life, my own limitations, my own gifts and strengths. How is it this particular day, in this particular moment, in these particular circumstances, that I can somehow make a gift of myself to others?